I am $28,000 in debt.
I have at least $95,000 in student loan debt.
I'm paying off a law school debt of $100,388.
When I graduated law school, I had like $250,000 in debt.
I graduated at 26 years old as a dentist with $575,000, so more than $500,000 in debt.
In Blood Debts, we tell the stories of choices and sacrifices to pay back what is owed and pay forward something of value. I'm your host, Lizelle Teng Lao. On this podcast, we talk about one of the few through lines in people's lives, debt. You'll hear stories from the Filipino diaspora around how debt has impacted all aspects of life, from those in the medical field, the public service sector, to technology and the creative arts. As a journalist, I've spent more than a decade reporting on the financial aspects of debt in diverse communities. But many people carry debts beyond money. In this episode, we look at how student loans affect a person's life when culture meets the debt crisis. Listener discretion is advised. People go to college to get an education, not to get into debt. Unfortunately, the numbers are staggering when it comes to the student loan debt crisis. More than 44 million Americans collectively have $1.6 trillion in student loan debt, according to the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System.
My name is Samantha Tillipot, and I am known as the Dentist, a blogger who writes about the lifestyle I've built around paying back $575,000 of student debt.
I went to the most expensive school, dental school in the country at the time. And I did have a choice to go to a cheaper school in the middle of my education, but I decided not to switch schools or transfer.
Like others in the podcast, cultural norms have played a role in some of the decisions Samantha and her family made.
When I was 18, like a typical Filipino, my mom insisted on throwing a traditional debut, which is essentially like a quinceañera, but for Filipinos. And I didn't want it because I was very introverted. I dreaded the thought of going up in front of everyone and performing dances and speeches, whatever else. But she insisted. And so like a good daughter, I went along with it. It was essentially a $10,000 birthday party. I kid you not. It was like a wedding. And so there's photographers, videographers, 2 gowns, everything. And it wasn't really like for me. And I don't even think it was for her. I think it was more like a coming of age party that was more for our friends and relatives than it was for us. My credit cards, which my mom had access to, were maxed out because she had used her account holder abilities to pay for both parties, but also for like general things for the family. When you're 18 and your mom says don't worry about it, it's very easy to just be like, okay, maybe there's something I don't know, maybe I shouldn't worry about it. But eventually at age 20, after continually getting those letters, I took the cards back and closed both accounts.
And with more than $500,000 in student loan debt, here's how Samantha took back control of her life.
I think really the word I use when it comes to describing like my relationship with debt is fear. It was like a crippling type of fear. So most of the time after I graduated, I felt like really guilty or caged. And I was convinced, like I felt like the debt was enslaving me. You know what I mean? Like financial freedom was the only thing that would allow me to live my life in peace. There is this American dream that you chase. And I felt like I worked so hard for that American dream, only to find myself after all of that hard work in a bigger hole than when I started. And it was almost like I came here because my parents hoped for more opportunity for me and equal opportunity. But what ended up happening is I graduated from dental school with like an uneven playing field. Like I was starting negative $575,000 from my peers, and despite having a profession that's more like esteemed, my starting line is just so far back from everybody else. Like I felt like, okay, after all that hard work, how does one catch up? And the fear was so bad. I never like talked about this, but I think it's important to say the fear was so bad that I felt like legitimately desperate and like depressed. And my husband can tell you there were like nights couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe, a lot of crying. Some days I would feel like physically dead. I do nothing. Like on those days, I did nothing at all. And I'm so grateful that my CFP recognized how much pain I was going through. And I still remember that phone call really, really well because I felt like it was a phone call that saved my life. Like when he said, I think you can do this. Before that, my husband and I were talking about going to psych therapy for me. I would physically hurt myself because I was just like so, I don't know, like, yeah, enslaved. I felt so like constricted. So when the CFP told me I can attempt to pay it back aggressively, I totally became a different person. Like I felt in control of my life. And we were doing this like snowball method, right, of getting rid of debt. And we got to a point where he noticed I was saving like $6,000 or $7,000 a month. And initially he was like, "Oh yeah, there's no way we could do this." But when I consistently did it for like 3 months, he was like, "Oh my God, I think you can, like with your, I guess, determination, I think you can actually pay it off in 10 years or less." And it seems like psychologically that might be what's best for you. I was already saving the amount of money I would need to pay it off aggressively. So I just took that money that was going into a savings account and I just started paying off the debt. I was trying to pay it off in 10 years and I'm on track to pay it off in 7, which is crazy. So in 4 more years, it'll be paid off.
And for Samantha, blood debts runs even deeper.
Blood debt for me personally, blood debts is me debating about doing this podcast and every podcast that discusses my money egg because I have that fear that the telling of my story would somehow hurt my family, right? Even though deep down I know it benefits so many more people, which is why I always choose to tell it. But in the back of my mind, blood debts is like that nagging feeling of like, protect the family. Don't say anything that would make people think less of them and or hurt them. And it's that Eastern culture mentality of like shouldering a family burden. I mean, we always say like blood is thicker than water. And so in Filipino culture specifically, we are taught to feel like we owe the generations before us in exchange for the sacrifices that they made. And I think it could be good. We're taught in an early age to act from a place of humility and gratitude. And because of this, it sets us up for acting from a place of selflessness. If you think about the stereotypical professions that we hold, it's, caregiving, nursing, teaching, housekeeping, medicine. And in this way, like blood debt sets us up for contributing to the community and to the world and with some of the most like selfless jobs. If from birth we're taught to protect a group of people we just happen to be born into, I think it sets us up for adulthood. It makes us capable of helping people we've only just met.
There are many sides to debt. This series intends to take you on a journey through defining and redefining debt through the stories of Filipinos in the diaspora. Upcoming stories from guests like Major General Antonio Taguba, rapper Ruby Ibarra are just a sampling of the journeys you'll hear along the way. That's all for this episode. Thank you for listening. To find out more about the series and upcoming episodes and resources, visit blooddebts.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you for listening. To find out more about the series and upcoming episodes and resources, visit blooddebts.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Blood Debts is produced and hosted by me, Lizelle Tanglao. This series is a legacy project of the Filipino Young Leaders Program. Shout out to FilPro Batch 8. This series is dedicated to all those who struggle to talk about uncomfortable issues. And for all those who ever felt overlooked. I see you, I hear you.